Hi guys, welcome back to another Apex Racing Academy setup tutorial video. Alex Simpson here in the Formula Renault, continuing on from where we just left off for the damper adjustments. We're at Nürburgring, like before. Oh, look, you can see YouTube going on. I'm watching myself back. um, let me get that away. Yeah, so like before, no need to really sort of go out on the track or anything like that to talk about, to sort of show you this one or the changes that it makes in the car. These are just fairly self-explanatory, yeah, can't talk, adjustments that we need to make. So what we're going to do, we're going to focus on the differential and the brake bias and how we'll use those in the car. And brake bias is apologies, right? If you're watching this one, you go, "Come on, Alex, everyone bloody knows what brake bias does." Well, there's some people that don't, all right? So don't hit on the rookies. Some of them have only been in the fixed cars and won't know exactly what it does. So, yeah. So obviously the brake bias 56.5% to the front on the default setups, and the left will take it down and up, right will take it up. What we really want to do with the brake bias is the key thing with this car, with any car on iRacing right now, is to avoid locking up going into the corner. The minute we lock up any tyre going in is the minute we're going to lose time through the corner. Now, the reason we lose an absolute boatload of time on iRacing is because we're superheating the tyres when we lock them up, and every degree that the tyre is hotter is about a constant of about 2 or 3 tenths of a second that we're going to lose on the track. So yeah, that's over a course of a lap. So if you lock up, you could be looking at about half a tenth, or maybe even a tenth of a second that you could lose, even if it's a minor one. If you have a major lockup, you could be talking, 3-4 tenths that you could lose because the car's just going to want to plow on. Now, fortunately, when we lock the brakes, most of the time, it's the inside tyre, because it's unloaded, that will lock up. So if it's just a long right-hander, for example, we'll lock and we'll go a little bit wide because we've lost a little bit of the rotation, but it won't be too bad. Now, if you go into a chicane, for example, well, that's when you have the problems. So if anyone's done Monza, or the first turn at Monza, or the last turn at Spa, something like that, you come hammering in there, you lock that inside wheel up, you turn to the right, you make the apex fine, you turn to the left, and it's like there's nothing there. The car just goes straight on. So this is what we're trying to avoid. That's what we can sort of help somewhat with the brake bias. And now it might be that the perfect brake bias for a corner like that might not be the ideal brake bias for other corners. So it's a bit of a compromise in some places. So it might be that, well, actually we can use the in-car adjustments, and we can set the brake bias for everywhere else. Let's just say, for example, 56.5 is spot on, doesn't lock up anywhere else, but going into the chicane at the Nürburgring, it does lock up, or down into turn 1 it does lock up. And anyone who's watched the last couple of videos, there's 2 or 3 corners that are quite bad, so we want to shift that back a little bit, and that will stop the car from locking that inside wheel. Now, it might be that you still can't stop the locking, and then that's something to do with your setup. Now, here at Nürburgring, like the turn 1, the downhill right-hander and then the hairpin right-hander, the track drops away, always. And that's what's locking the tyre up. So the car's quite stiff. So as the track starts to drop away, the front tyre's not going with it. And if you've just watched my damping videos, you should know how to fix that. I don't give you the exact, if the track does this, this is what you need to do. But the track's dropping away and the front tyre's not going down with the track. You should know from watching that exactly a good idea and a good way to cure that. Do that in conjunction with moving the brake bias backwards to get the sweet spot so that the car doesn't lock going into the turn. Of course, if The opposite is true. If we're going into a corner and the back end's all twitchy and wants to over rotate, and we're not locking the fronts up, but the car snaps around, then what it more likely is that we've got the brake bias a little bit too far to the back. So go check your brake bias setting, and it might be that you just need to move this forward a little bit. Say, everybody's different. Everybody has different equipment. Everybody has different techniques on how they brake, different ways they brake. They'll brake stronger at the start, less at the end, or whatever, and that will affect. So if you do nothing from any of the setups that you grab off of the forums or the setup shops or our academy or anything like that, what you have to do is you have to spend some time and find the right brake bias setting for you with that setup. It's an absolute must, because you will not have the same equipment, the same tension, the same wear on the equipment, the same footwear and things like that, as the person who built the setup. That's built for them. So that needs to be one of your go-to things that you adjust. As really is the diff as well, I would say. A lot of my teammates will run their car, their diff's a lot more open, where I like them a little bit tighter on the way in. So, but their setup, there's nothing wrong with their setup, but they're just the way that their diff allows the car just to swing in a little bit more. It's just they might be a bit more aggressive on the brake pedal or trail braking a little bit more, and I'm not doing that. We're just giving the car a bit more rotation. A lot of people say, "Oh, Alex, your car's really understeery" and things like that on some of these setups. But I've also had people say, "Whoa, it's well too oversteery," and that's just because of how the car transitions in, how you are as far as the brake pedal and the differential, what you want, and what you feel, whether how much steering lock you put into it. So. With the diff, we'll just head down to here. There's really a couple of different options that you can choose. So a 65 70 diff. Let me I just need to make 100% sure that I'm right when I say this as well. Yeah. So they've done it so the higher number has less lock-in force, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. So what effectively we've done here, we've got a 65/70, so we're saying, right, well, we want to lock the diff a little bit more on entry with coast, basically is as we enter into the corner, than when we drive. So the car is a bit freer coming out of the corner, but a bit more planted going into the corner. So we're trying to stop the car over rotating, but allow it to rotate through the middle and off of the corner. So hence the 60/75. We've only got two settings to choose. The other one is 70/65, so that's completely the opposite. So this will make the car a little bit looser going into the corner, but a little bit tighter coming off of the corner. So the diff will want to be locked. So if you get a bit of wheel spin coming off of the corner, then the 65 should help to keep that keep the tyres locked together, and give you a little bit of understeer coming off the corner. Of course, the opposite is true. You can get snap oversteer from the understeer, so just be mindful of that. If you're on that and you think, well, I can't go anymore, do go and try the 70, because that might just give you the rotation off that you're after, because the diff's allowed to be a little bit freer and allows the wheels to rotate at different speeds. The preload is basically a fine tuner of these settings. So the more preload we have on the car, the more the diff is locked together. So just to talk about exactly what the rear diff is doing. So when we come into a corner and we brake into the corner and want to turn, if we've got a lot of locking force on the diff, what it's trying to do is trying to keep these two wheels on the left and right of the car rotating at the same speed. So if you have 100% locked diff, yeah, the car is basically not going to want to turn at all. So I guess if you had a front diff and a rear diff that was 100% locked, it wouldn't matter where the steering wheel was going. It would just be like the car would sort of drive like that. It would be very, very weird. So yeah, 100% lock diff. Like I say, the car's barely going to turn whatsoever like that. So we have a slip differential, so that the inside wheel can travel slightly slower than the outside wheel, or the outside wheel can travel faster. And the freer the diff, so the lower the number, the more it will allow the car to rotate freely through the corner. So it's a good way of like fine tuning if the car just has like just a hair too much of oversteer, just a little bit too snappy. You think, oh, just want it to be just a little bit more comfortable on the way in, then just go up one click on the diff, and that'll just lock it up a bit, just make it a little bit more comfortable for you going into the corner. So real simple adjustment that you can make that fine tunes it. On the reverse side, obviously when you're coming out of the corner, because you've got a bit more locked diff, yeah, that's going to make it's going to have sort of two effects on the car. So if the car if those rear tires are locked coming out of the corner, you could get scrub rotation round, where it's just sort of pulling the car, it's sort of driving the car off, and a bit of wheel spin or something like that. So you can force the car around, but of course you have to be careful of that, because you get the snap oversteer that comes with it as well. But it will drive off on that higher speed corners a little bit better with the sort of the diff a little bit more locked. But out of the slow speed corners, the general rule is that the more locked it is, the more understeer you'll get, basically. Um, when That's not exactly right. You will get rotation off, and it even says that in the info as well. But you got to, like I said, you got to be careful with the snap on this front. Now, when you have a lower differential coming in, obviously, like I say, the car will rotate in. So if you've got too much understeer going in, just go down a click or two. That will help the car get in, but it'll be a bit freer coming through the corner. So you've got more chance of this inside wheel spinning, I think, is basically the key, which can cause uh, some over rotation again, because obviously it's not, the wheels aren't driving at the same speed. So coming out of the corner is very, very tricky to explain, because they both do very similar things, but in a different way, just of how they treat the tire. It's not a slam dunk like it kind of says in the info. But from my feel, they are quite right in what they say. The higher the number is, the more the car will want to rotate off of the corner. The lower the number, it'll actually give you a little bit more understeer, because the wheels will be connected to the road a little bit more, and it'll want to drive off of that corner. So sorry, I don't think I've gone into the greatest of detail. It's quite tricky, because I will, in some of the more high performance cars, for example, there are times when I will force the car to rotate off of the corner using a higher diff, but then there's times I'll want to drive off of the corner with a lower diff, so I want to have a bit more rotation, so that I can carry on turning through the middle of the corner and through the exit as well. So in that case, I'll use a lower diff. So yeah, it's not as straightforward, but I think in the basic terms of, if the car over rotates going in, you want stiffer. If the car understeers going in, then you want less preload onto it. If you are struggling more with if you can't quite get the right feel off the corner, like if the car's rotating, say we were set on 70-65. Yeah, okay. So yeah, say we were set on 70-65, for example, and the car was over rotating in, but on the way out it was also over rotating on the way out. What we could do, any amount of course, if you add any amount of extra preload here, for example, then the car is going to carry on rotating off the corner even more, even worse. We're going to make that even worse. So that's why we would switch to like a 65. So we're locking up the way on the car on the way in, yeah, but we're freeing it up on the way out, so that in theory the back end should not want to turn as much going into the corner, and it should be a little bit more planted on the way out as well. So there's the differences. So if you just can't get the balance right with the preload, then don't worry. Try the diff ramp angle as well. And obviously the opposite is true if it's if we're set here right now, if we're understeering and we're understeering on the way in and we're understeering on the way out, and you're on 65 and 75, yeah, then a 70 and a 65 would be better. No amount of the preload adjustments gonna adjust that as well, because you're just gonna basically, you can make the car rotate in more, but of course it will with less, but it will have even less rotation off of the corner as well. So right, I hope I've explained that right. Sorry, I know I've explained it right. I hope I've explained it in a way that you understand it as well. So, diffs not always the most straightforward thing. Diffs and brakes work very much in conjunction with each other. It might be as you adjust the brake bias down that you need to go up on the preload to stop the rear end from locking on the way in. So, have a good feel. Like I say, you can work this brake bias back quite a way. All of a sudden the back end will start locking, so you can adjust that so that it doesn't lock up, and the diff keeps it yammed together, so that it keeps it driving, doesn't lock an inside wheel up, so that you can prevent the front tires from locking and getting some understeer because of the excessive heat. So there's a fair amount you can fine tune with the brake bias and the differential to get the balance right. And like I say, these really are my go-to adjustments if I was just going to jump into somebody else's set. I didn't have time to do anything. I had a half an hour. I would play with the diff and I'd play with the brake bias. Alright guys, thanks very much for listening to me there, and yeah, hopefully we covered everything. The final video that I'm going to do is just going to be about converting what you need to do to convert a race set into a Q set. Sorry, a Q set into a race set. It's super simple in this car because there's nothing like spring purge offsets and all that kind of stuff to do. So I'm going to do that video in just a short second, and that'll be us done and dusted for the season. All right, guys, thanks a lot again for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next video.